I'm Dr. Charles Cory, and I head up the Equal Justice Foundation. I've been working with Congressman Doug Lamborn for over a decade now, since he was in the State House and the State Senate, uh, basically trying to reform laws on domestic violence, particularly the Violence Against Women Act, and also helping veterans, which is a major problem here in Colorado Springs. We'd like to see laws, particularly affecting domestic violence, that don't penalize veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injuries.
What would you like Congress and the state legislators to do about it?
Get the hell out of Dodge, basically.
All right.
We need to make the Violence Against Women Act gender neutral. We need to provide more treatment and support for disabled veterans.
Explain to the people watching what the problems are with the Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA, what it is now. I guess the name says it's violence against women. Is also violence against men?
Absolutely. The problem with the Violence Against Women Act is it has the built-in assumption that all men are batterers and all women are victims. And in fact, the data is quite conclusive. I think my colleague, Professor Martin Fieber, now has something over 275 studies that he's entered in his bibliography showing that women are as equally violent as men, and in younger couples, women are 2 to 3 times as violent as men. About half the time, it's mutual combat. The Violence Against Women Act makes no provision for that, and it makes, or it basically eliminates almost all the Bill of Rights. You're presumed guilty until you can prove your innocence. It takes away your gun rights, freedom of speech. There are very few rights left to a man who is accused of domestic violence. And then the man is required to spend tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees to try and prove his innocence, or he loses his home, his car, his kids, his bank accounts, basically everything he's worked for. Typically he ends up homeless. That's ridiculous, particularly when it's the woman who's violent. And very frequently we encounter men who are being attacked, or their children are being attacked, and they call the police, and the police come and arrest the male, even if he's bleeding and been stabbed or shot.
From the interviews I've done around the country, it seems like the person that calls and reports the abuse is the one who ends up in trouble and loses the kids. Doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman.
The laws do not work either way.
In Colorado, the law, as I understand it, is that if there's a call and a report of abuse of some type in a home, somebody's going to get arrested. It's automatic arrest. Is that the story?
Colorado laws provide for mandatory arrest, and that's only if the officer finds probable cause. Now, most of the time, the officers do not find probable cause, but about 10% of the time they do.
You think that law needs to go too?
There's a Harvard study here in the past couple of years that showed in states that have mandatory arrest laws in domestic violence cases increases homicides by 60% compared to states that do not have a mandatory arrest law. So yes, the law needs to go. There was a study done in 5 cities, including Colorado Springs, in the 1980s involving the police departments, and they showed that if you arrested the male, and they always arrested the male then, that if the male was unemployed at the time of the arrest, it would increase the crime rate and the violence. I've shown that with veteran arrests as well.
Talk, if you will, about the specific problems relative to veterans with all of this.
The basic problem is post-traumatic stress disorder, and its concomitant traumatic brain injuries are completely or exactly similar to domestic violence as currently defined in the law. So any veteran suffering from post-traumatic stress, PTSD, who begins acting out, and they all eventually act out, is almost certain to be arrested for domestic violence. So 30% of the 3,200 veterans who are arrested here every year are arrested for domestic violence. Typically the wives or girlfriends do not want them arrested. They're seeking treatment for them, and typically it's not the wife or girlfriend who calls the police. It's a neighbor or a passerby or someone else.
What's the solution there?
Treatment and deferred prosecution rather than conviction and destroying their lives.
Okay.
The problem is, under current Colorado, you cannot use deferred prosecution if there's a charge of domestic violence. Also, under Colorado law, an intimate relationship does not have to involve a sexual relationship. One of the attorneys we work with points out, strongly recommends that a man never let a woman into his house unless he's run a background check on her first. We've had a number of women who have gotten with a man, either picked him up in a bar and gone home with him, or he's invited her in. She starts trouble, police are called, she gets a restraining order, prohibits him from going to his own house or apartment or whatever, and she ends up basically taking over the house or the apartment. Commonly she'll steal or trash or sell everything in the apartment or house. The man spends months, if he can, getting her out. A lot of times he has no choice because he violently objects and gets arrested again and thrown in jail for domestic violence.
So, don't you think the same thing happens with men moving in on women?
I've encountered a number of cases, particularly where an attorney is involved with a woman or wants to get rid of his wife, does the same thing. But the laws so strongly favor women that it is quite rare and usually fairly difficult. I've stood in court here where the magistrate awards restraining orders at the rate of one a minute to all the women before him and denies all the men. So there's extreme gender bias in the courts.
My experience is exactly the opposite. So I have a completely different perspective than you after interviewing close to 1,200 people all around the country. Now maybe it's because the men haven't come out as much as women, but I have heard 400 or 500 stories of women who've been abused or say they've been abused, and the husband not only has gotten away with the abuse, but has gotten away with the kids, stolen all the money, cut them off from everything, run them into bankruptcy. I mean, it's just a horror story. And
I'd be surprised if there were only 400 or 500 women in that situation in the country. However, there are something like 2 million men a year who go through this, according to all available data. And the number of women is at least an order of magnitude smaller than that.
Why won't the guys come out and talk to me for the movie?
One of the big things that you find in dealing with these issues is men don't talk. And getting them to tell their stories is pulling teeth. Most commonly, the people that contact us are the man's mother, his girlfriend, his sister, even a neighbor, but usually a woman contacts us about these problems. Men don't talk, and it's particularly troublesome with veterans, combat veterans. Usually they won't even admit they've got a problem till they end up in an orange jumpsuit in the county jail.
Got any ideas for why we have such a problem with domestic abuse in the first place?
We have a problem because the law's invented. We've always had couples fighting, arguing. It made a very good way to get money for radical feminists. I work with Erin Pizzey, have for well over a decade now, who began the movement. Her book, Scream Quietly or The Neighbors Here, first brought the problem of abused women to the world's attention, and she helped establish one of the first shelters for abused women in Chiswick, London, England. And in fact, it was the Queen who helped her keep going when the local borough tried to evict her from the shelter. But when she tried to do the same thing for men, she got no support whatsoever. Actual domestic violence where there's real physical abuse is pretty rare. It's one of the rarer crimes. About 0.04%, or 0.4%, excuse me, of couples experience real domestic violence in a given year. And the only solution I found, or any of the people I work with have found when there's real violence, is get out of Dodge. We recommend they move at least 500 miles away, and 1,000's better. And the laws have provided for women to get change their Social Security numbers, hide their identity, have their mail forwarded. The Secretary of State here does that in Colorado, so that they can hide their identity so they can't be tracked. Because it's very easy to track someone now with the internet. So there are a number of laws to help these people who are actually abused, typically women, hide their identity and move away to escape their abuser. But we've had, I remember one case, a woman tracked her husband across 3 states and killed him. So you see a lot of stalking. You see a lot of stalking in any relationship, almost any high school or college swain, male or female, has what's now called stalked their intimate partner. Mostly that's pretty harmless, but it can become quite obsessive and doesn't always involve intimate partners. Case in New Mexico of a woman claiming that some national radio figure or TV figure was stalking her and sending her secret messages, and the judge in Santa Fe awarded her a restraining order. I've seen a number of cases like that. The naval captain who was an astronaut stalking her. She was married, a Navy captain and a female astronaut, and stalked her boyfriend's lover from Houston, I believe, to Florida, and tried to kill her, or was intending to kill her. You see these kind of stalking stories all the time. So even getting out of Dodge doesn't provide safety in many cases unless you're really very careful about hiding. But it is quite a rare crime, but it's quite a remunerative crime if you're in a divorce situation and you want to keep the house, the car, the kids, and the bank accounts. And you've described your experience with female victims, but if you could get male victims to talk about it, you'd find much worse situations. Male victims of this sort of fraud don't get any help at all. Typically end up living in their car or along the street or along the creek bed. And we have any number of those stories as well.
So Equal Justice Foundation, do you focus on anything other than violence against women and equality there, and problems that veterans have specifically? Is that the total focus? Or
no, we have, I believe, 8 different books. For one thing, I'm on the Institute of Electrical and Electronic IEEE, Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers Voting Equipment Standards Committee, have been since 2001, attempting to set standards for voting equipment. That's been a big failure. I'm currently trying to set standards for data transfer on voting information. With the internet and the move to mail ballot elections, it's become ever easier to commit election fraud, particularly with the computer machines. I also write on civilization and the origins. Paternity fraud is a fairly major issue with us. 30% of the DNA tests come back the man is not the father. Family issues, trying to keep families together. Children, Child Protective Services. There's horror stories after horror story. I'm sure you've heard some from the women who've talked about it. And so I go round and round with that. Trying to think I know we've got 8 different books out there on. We helped pioneer the veteran court here, the first one in Colorado in 2008, now trying to make that functional. And so one of the things I'm doing is a study on veteran arrests. I get a daily veteran arrest report from the county sheriff listing all the veterans and active duty military who've been arrested in the past 24 hours. Excuse me.
Yeah, and that's just in Colorado or just in this
That's just
county?
Colorado Springs, El Paso County.
Okay.
This is a very good site for it. We have 5 military bases here and 5 or 6 different police departments, and all of them use the Criminal Justice Center as a common point. So all of the veterans who are arrested come into the what's called the CJC, Criminal Justice Center. So you get a very good arrest, and because of the extremely large number of veterans in this county, it's a good place to collect data and have a central data collection point for us. What else have I been working on?
What about just the general problem we have of dishonesty and corruption and not having an honest judge in America? Is that an issue for you guys?
Yeah, I just did, and I'll leave it with you.
How to judge judges, and just tabulated all of the
Judges.
So that's in that. Another thing that we have that's used all over the country is the Court Watcher form. And doing a talk show in New York, I believe it was, and they mentioned they were using it, so I know it's used all across the country. Judicial performance. We have a section, Colorado Judges Citizens Review, and so if we get these forms back on a Colorado judge, then I link them to the judge's name on the website. So,
Do you think we have any honest judges in America?
we've got some outstanding judges in America, but we've also got some pretty corrupt ones as well.
Can you name one outstanding one?
Bird.
Bird?
B-U-R-D. Forget her first name. She's a county judge in Denver. I did a hearing with a former lieutenant governor here a year ago. Joe somebody, what the hell's his last name? If you look under Denver County on that, you'll find her. And one of the problems in the court
Here we go, Doris Bird.
is that she is the district attorney bring forward these so-called experts on domestic violence who talk about the power and control, the cycle of violence, etc., which does happen in some cases, but again, it's fairly rare. Judge Bird rejected the expert witness that the Denver County had been using for some years, and I was quite impressed with her.
Well, what I'd like to do is contact her and tell her that you said that she's an outstanding judge and see if she'll agree to be interviewed. My opinion is that there's not an honest judge in America.
Well, what I did, and I just published it here because we're coming up for the election, is I reviewed all of the judges standing for retention. There are 90 judges this year, and we have a Judicial Performance Review Commission here, and they publish the information about them, but they usually just come up with a whitewash. So what I did is they also list the percentage of attorneys who voted to retain and not retain, and I just went through that based on an article, a 2002 article in Rocky Mountain News that had been brought back to my attention by a judge who didn't like the low rating he'd been given. And I just went through it, and then I went back through all of the retention data for all of the Colorado judges from 1998 to 2012. That's what's available on the internet. And compared it and used these cutoff criteria. There are a lot of judges who the attorneys, who I think are the best judges of judges, because they appear before them on a regular basis, whereas I might see a judge in a case once or twice. The attorneys probably see them once a week in many cases. And so I used what the attorneys said about the judges as the measure of whether they should be retained or not retained. And a number of judges get 100% of the attorneys' votes in their district.
You believe we have honest attorneys in America?
I deal with a number of them.
You and I don't see the world the same way, Dr. Cory. I don't think as litigators we've got an honest, if there's an honest attorney, there's a handful, and I know most of them. I don't see how in the world you could expect a lawyer to judge a judge. These lawyers can't risk telling the truth about judges because their career's at stake.
No, that's not, because the surveys are anonymous. So there's no way to tie them back to and the Judicial Performance Review Commission is set up separately from the judges.
You think the Judicial Performance Review does anything?
It certainly collects a lot of data about the judges. They've become more standardized over the past decade about the information they collect. It's probably as useful a system as one could envision that's going to work on a regular basis.
Well, how about having somebody other than lawyers and judges evaluating lawyers and judges? I'll tell you how to deal with the problem of justice, if you don't mind. You make the rules of professional conduct for lawyers laws, and you make them criminal violations if they violate them. You take the Code of Judicial Conduct for judges, you make it a law. You make it a crime if they violate those. Then I don't think we'll have people going around breaking every imaginable law and violating all the constitutional rights. I don't believe there is such a word as justice in America. It's misspelled. You should spell it J-U-S-T-U-S.
Well, I would beg to disagree on a number of points. One, the Judicial Performance Reviews have 6 attorneys and 4 citizens. A fairly broad spectrum of input. Most of them simply whitewash the judge, regardless of how the attorneys vote. I've seen a vote to retain of 36% of the attorneys, and the commission voted to retain. In this review that this lady's looking at, I've put down, we don't recommend to retain. You don't fix bad law by passing more laws. The major problem we have in this country in terms of justice is we have far too many laws. In Colorado, the legislature passes on average about 400 new laws every year. No one knows what the laws are. So passing more laws to criminalize attorney conduct will simply be ignored. There are already many laws that apply to these. And we have a code of judicial conduct already, judicial rules.
Well, none of them go by them. How do you have to find a judge? I challenge you or anyone else to show me a judge that honors constitutional rights and goes by the Code of Judicial Conduct. I would be delighted to review all their cases. I don't believe there is a one out there. Every judge knows that his fellow judges are corrupt and they do nothing about it. That's my view, and I've got documentation galore.
I've seen it far too often, and the real problem that I hear about all the time is perjury. Perjury is never prosecuted. I've talked to the district attorneys about it, a number of them in the state, and the reason it's not prosecuted is it's very difficult to prove, number one, and two, usually if it is proved, it's simply a slap on the wrist. Typically it's a misdemeanor, and it's a slap on the wrist. So perjury goes unchallenged. The best liar typically wins. Now, there are simply too many laws for any judge to really know them. I have the Colorado Revised Statutes. It's a shelf like this. No one knows, and as I said, they pass 400 new ones every year. No human can keep up with these. Some judges try. I see some good judges. What happens is they're usually pushed out because they're too soft. Prosecutors consider them too soft, and they usually don't stay on the bench very long. Also, there are a lot of judges on the bench who are there because they make very poor private attorneys. They can't make a living as private attorneys, so they stay on the bench. It's not very remunerative in terms of what a good attorney can make to be a judge. So there are a lot of factors weighting against good judges, but I have seen good judges. I've seen some really impressive rulings. I've seen some god-awful ones, a lot more god-awful than impressive rulings.
Well, we're proposing a new political party called the Revolutionary Party. It stands for honesty, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and to build in accountability by allowing, if anybody violates, a citizen feels that an elected official or a government employee violates those basic tenets that we're all supposed to live by, that they can take it to a citizen grand jury, and if they vote that they violated it, they're removed from office. Would you support that?
Well, I've been a Ron Paul supporter for a number of years, and if you see my vehicle and my yard, we've got a Gary Johnson sign. So I'm very much oriented in that direction. However, the present state of education of citizens, all the time I run into these people who don't even know there are three phases or three separate branches of government. They're writing their congressman about a state court judge. They're talking to the mayor about a judge's actions, or they're talking to their legislature about something the mayor's responsible for, or the county commission. The problem is frequently with the extremely poor level of education of the citizens. As a professor, I ran into that. Also tried reforming high schools when I was in Woods Hole Oceanographic on Cape Cod. My sons were in high school there. I was on the reform committee, one of two parents trying to reform the high school. Just a disaster. The English teacher couldn't balance her checkbook. They
I hope she can spell.
I don't think her grammar was quite accurate. In correcting many of my son's papers, history, no knowledge of history, why some things work, why some things don't work. Socialism was very popular because people think, oh yeah, the government, big sister can do it for me, or big brother, whichever side of that issue you're on. So people keep trying socialism. We all know it doesn't work. I mean, if we're educated. But the general public hasn't the education and history to understand why it doesn't work and why it never can work. So the big problem in bringing citizens in is first you have to educate them, which I'm all in favor of. And for 30 years now, we've been putting more and more money into education and getting worse and worse teachers. So that's the problem with the libertarian approach, is it works with an educated citizenry. It doesn't work with the general masses. And government likes to keep people ignorant. It's much to the government's advantage to have an ignorant populace. A lot of the times the problems in the courts are that people will go and think, if I just tell the judge and the district attorney what really happened, that they'll understand and everything will be worked out. They have no idea it's an adversarial system, and that the district attorney is there to prosecute, and that's how the district attorneys get promoted, and that the information will be used against them. Miranda ruling be damned, or warning. And I've seen more people sell themselves down the river than I can blame on bad judges.
One of the problems is people who can't afford the legal system. People who have to take pleas because they don't want to run the risk of these outrageous things they scare them with as their potential penalties. If you get a court-appointed attorney, they're paid by the county, the prosecutor's paid by the county, the judge is paid by the county, the bailiffs, the sheriffs, the police are paid by the county. They all work for the same person. And there's got to be a better way, don't you think?
Well, again, it's a partial problem of education. One, don't quote me on the numbers, but we have something like 60,000 misdemeanor cases in this state in a year, and about 1,000 jury trials. Basically, all you need to do is say not guilty and demand a jury trial, and the case will be dismissed. So what we see with the district attorney is they tell them that if they don't take the plea bargain, they'll be held in jail until trial 6 months down the road. The speedy trial in Colorado is 6 months from the time you're arraigned. And also, we literally see torture. Hypothermia is quite commonly used. Most jails, I find, have a cold room, and they have no scruples about putting these people in the cold room overnight and then bringing them into court, and they'll be dressed no warmer than you are, sitting in a room that's 55 degrees and no blanket. And after that, and of course, even in the best of circumstances, they don't sleep. So we finally got rid of what they called fast track here for domestic violence cases, where they'd bring them into court and never give them a chance to see a defense attorney or explain the penalties that they'd face if they took the plea bargain. They demand they take the plea bargain before they'd ever seen a defense attorney, and if they didn't, then they'd tell them all the horror stories that I'm sure you're familiar with. So we finally got a system now where they're arraigned, they give a video interview conference with a judge, they're allowed to plead out or make bond or given a personal recognizance bond and come back 7 days later to enter a plea. So it gives them a chance to get a defense attorney. Also, the magistrate now explains the consequences of accepting the plea bargain, what the penalties are. And what I've done on that war against veteran is list the consequences of a domestic violence conviction or a felony conviction. And another problem we have here is they elevate the charges to try and coerce them into taking a plea bargain. So drunken disorderly, this is a military town, drunken disorderly now is commonly charged as a Class 4 felony. There are 6 levels of felonies in Colorado. Class 1 felony, of course, first degree murder. Class 6 felony would be typically something like marijuana possession. Class 4 felony is going to see jail time if they're convicted. So charge them high, plead them out low. And those are problems with the district attorney usually. Now the courts turn a blind eye to those procedures typically, but the courts cannot, as a separate branch of government, cannot interfere with the actions of the district attorney. And the district attorney, of course, is part of the executive branch and elected official. So the courts in many ways have their hands tied on how these cases are handled, and they can approve or disapprove of what's brought before them. And these people, defendants, are often like sheep. I mean, they're just blindly led to slaughter. They're not informed of what will happen or the penalties, and they think, oh, a misdemeanor, or, well, it was a Class 4 felony and now it's just a Class 6 felony and no jail time. So let's take it. And they have no idea of how the court works. And I run into a lot of public defenders who are very motivated. Here they're paid by the state, not by the county. So the problem with the public defenders is simply the number of cases they have. In this county, a public defender will often have 400 or 500 cases that they're working on at a given time.
That's why they come in and say, give me 5 minutes to read your file, and then they represent you.
They, a lot of times, don't even look at the file until they're in the courtroom. Now, if you insist on a jury trial, then the public defender will try to get you to take a plea bargain, but if you just keep saying, no, I'm going to go to trial, then the public defender is forced to do the preparation. The problem is, under current procedures, the district attorney knows they can't win this case before a jury. They know they don't have the resources to try it. They likely know the witness is not going to show up, but they will not dismiss the case until the day before or the morning of the trial. So attorney, either private or public defenders, have to prepare for trial because it may go to trial. So you get a lot of wasted time and effort because the district attorney is looking tough on crime. So I would suggest you look very closely at how district attorneys are working. You know, the judges, a lot of times, there are a lot of bad judges. I see some horrible cases of judges. But a lot of them really try.
Well, I'm going to give every judge in America the opportunity to try and to report their fellow judges who are dishonest and corrupt. We're going to contact every single one of them.
Well, you might start in Colorado because the judicial performance reviews are out there and they're public record from 1998 on. And you've got quite a history of them already accumulated for you. But judges will rarely talk on the record. The canons of judicial conduct in many places forbid it. And so you're...
And a lot of other things that they do. So let me ask you about the cold rooms, because I've never heard of that before. I mean, that's got to be cruel and unusual punishment. Those people who are putting people in cold rooms ought to be tarred, feathered, tried, stuck in a prison in the general population and in a very cold spot.
There is very good reason they have cold rooms.
Okay.
A lot of the people that come into the jail are, well, what's a better word than insane? They're drunk out of their minds. They're berserk. And one of the most effective ways to calm them down and quiet them down is to put them in the cold room. The problem is sorting out who should go into the cold room, and one of the problems with things like post-traumatic stress disorder is the irrational anger. And in the research on arrest, the effectiveness of arrest on domestic violence, because I was wondering, why do some people get arrested and some not? And this researcher, Lawrence Sherman's his name, asked that of the police. And what the police told him, the reason they arrest is aggravated popo. And popo is pissing off the police officer. And particularly with these veterans who are angry, they've oftentimes been drinking because they self-medicate with the PTSD. And they very rarely feel safe unless they're armed. So now you've got that situation, and they stay angry. And females do. I mean, you talk to the cops, and they'd rather face a berserk male than they would a berserk female, because the females just keep going. You know, they don't know when to quit. The males you can usually overpower and take them down, and they'll stop. But a berserk female won't. They'll just keep spitting and kicking and scratching. And so that's the reason they have the cold rooms. And it's a valid reason. It's effective. It calms them down, and that's a big problem when you take a prisoner in, is you've got to get them calmed down enough that you can deal with them.
Well, how about putting them in a cell? If they can get them in a cold room, they can get them in a cell. I mean, I'm sorry, to me, that is cruel, and I can't...
A cold room is a cell, first.
With a 55 or what? How
55 degrees is the common temperature. There are usually limits on how long they're supposed to leave them in there, an hour or 2 hours, so that it calms them down. If they put them in with other prisoners, there's a chance that the other prisoners will kill them or severely injure them because they keep fighting. They're not rational. So the safest thing you can do very frequently is put them in the cold room until they calm down.
But you started talking about the cold rooms, how they're obviously being abused.
They are sometimes abused. You know, anything in our so-called justice system is subject and commonly abused.
What percentage of people do you think are in jail or in prison who are innocent?
Well, I'd say all the drug offenders, you know, unless they're in there for some violent crime. So what's that percentage? 2/3 of them?
I don't know. Is it?
It's something like that. It's 800,000 a year to get arrested for drug abuses. And looking at a graph today, we spent at least $1.5 trillion on the war on drugs, and the rate of addiction is the same as it was back in 1970 when Nixon started it. A lot of the crime on the streets is the result of the drug wars. So anything associated with the war on drugs, I would say they're basically innocent. I mean, this is human behavior. And many drugs. The leading cause of liver failure in the United States is Tylenol, acetaminophen. Very dangerous drug if you've been drinking. Aspirin kills something like 10,000 people a year. The meningitis outbreak is prescription drugs that we're going through now. Much more dangerous than most of these drugs. And if you simply legalize them, you'd eliminate most of our prison population. So that percentage, the percentage who have gone through a jury trial, who are actually in fact innocent, I'd say is a very small percentage. Juries work pretty well. It's the only part of our justice system that I think works worth a damn. Juries are, in my experience, are quite good at seeing through the bullshit.
Yeah, I would say that's true, except when the judges deny letting all the evidence in.
That is so common. And what you find in the reviews is the judges are penalized if they don't manage their dockets. So you find docket management taking precedence over anything else. They've allotted 8 hours for this case, and by God, it's not going to go a minute over. More evidence just doesn't come in. I've seen a lot of judges who are very selective at what evidence they will allow. I've seen a lot of attorneys, prosecutors, who simply hide evidence. There were 2 judges in Larimer County voted out in 2010 because as prosecutors, they'd hidden evidence. It cost the county, Larimer County, in the northern end of the state, $10 million for this false conviction, this guy on murder. Turned out one of these judges was socially involved with the suspect, who probably was involved, in fact, with the murder. She didn't want that coming out. So you see all levels of corruption, and I've documented them. Moral turpitude. We had a judge here in Arapahoe County who was sneaking off with one of the attorneys into the women's showers and having sex. And that went on till his wife got a little upset. Now, in my Colorado Judges Citizens Review, I've documented, virtually every. But you're human, So, in any of situations, I've been a manager, research manager, and you expect about 5 to 10% are going to be corrupt, criminal, drunken, have some failure. So that's as the Peter principle. You rise to your level of incompetence. A lot of judges can't make that step up to being an impartial judge because they've been a prosecutor, and by God, it's Danny Deaver. He must be guilty or he wouldn't be here. So you see a lot of judges step up to the bench and they still keep that adversarial prosecutor attitude. So there's a lot of that goes on. But a lot of them step up and fill the position, and they're damn good at it. And the attorneys are the best judges I've seen because they see more of the judge than anybody else. Maybe the staff in these judicial performance reviews, in many cases, interviewed the court staff about how they felt and law enforcement. But those people see different aspects of a judge than an attorney does. So I haven't found a better. There's a guy, Matt Arnold, who has his site Clear the Bench. He works mainly with appellate cases, the appeals court, and says we should look at how often they're appealed. But a lot of judges are never appealed. Or in small towns, small places, the people don't have the money to run an appeal. Basic cost, I don't know what it is now. I haven't gone through one myself in 10, 12, 14 years. About 10 years, I guess. The basic cost was $20,000, though. It's probably at least twice that. I was paying about $200 an hour for attorneys, and now most of the attorneys I work with getting $300, $400, some $500 an hour. And it's rare that one's worth that. So one of the things we do is we have a sheet on you'll need an attorney, and here's what you need to look for, and a list of attorneys across the country that we know do a good job of representing. They're not cheap, but they will do the job. And if someone complains about them, they very quickly come off, and I've got a much longer blacklist of attorneys who have been reported to me for one reason or another. So.
Deb's got her hand up over here, wants to ask a question or two.
Dr. Cory, I just want to tell you that, being the founder of the Equal Justice, it's the Equal Justice
Foundation, yeah.
Foundation, must be a really important and responsible position to try and, create justice for disabled or veterans, men, women, poor.
Kids. You know who's getting hurt worse than this? The kids. We're destroying generations of kids.
I had a couple questions. The first one I wanted to ask is, how do you go about scoring that performance review? Where would I find that performance review, and how do I do it?
Just look on Colorado Judicial Performance Review.
Actually, I tried.
I've got one of these handouts has got.
So should I be able to type right into it? Because I did try that once and I couldn't type into it, so I printed it out.
Yeah, I thought I gave you the newsletter. There's something say newsletter on.
Yeah, newsletter here.
Yeah.
Judging Judges.
Yeah. Yeah, this newsletter has got links, and if you go on the site, of course they're all hyperlinked. So
I did go on the site and I tried. I thought maybe there was another way where I could just actually type right into it. So it didn't let me score it online. I had to print it out.
yeah, no, these are they have a summary online, and then they have a PDF file of how they scored, and you have to kind of just wade through that.
Yeah, I did have some trouble with that.
You can't, and you can't make any revisions in it, of course, either, unless I make a mistake. Then the state court administrator gives me trouble.
So do you oversee that process, or?
No, I'm not part of it. I've testified at them, but we found that pretty much a waste of time because they just whitewash the judge. That's why I went through this using all of the ways the attorneys have voted.
That's helpful, because you see that they're not just whitewashing as many there. So let me.
Well, I'm not whitewashing them.
Let me just ask you about.
Now, when you say responsibility, my wife gives me a bad time because when the county sheriff sees me, he says, "Here comes trouble," and she says, "If even the county sheriff calls you trouble."
That's pretty scary. You talked a lot about, there are judges with problems. There are judges who couldn't make it as attorneys and they become judges. So I'm just curious as to how many judges have been not retained since 1998. Can you give me a figure, like 1 a year, 5 a year?
They stand for retention, and this newsletter goes through the rates and summarizes the process. And they stand for retention in even years, depending. County judges every 4 years. Once they're appointed, they stand for retention after 2 years, and then every 4 years thereafter. A district judge stands for retention after 2 years, and then every 6 years thereafter. On the appeals court, they stand for retention after 7 years and every 7 years. On the Supreme Court, they stand for retention every 10 years.
So how many?
From 1998 to 2012, there were about 1,200 to 1,400 judges. I think around 1,200 judges came up for retention. 5 were recommended do not retain.
5 out of 1,200.
Yeah, and you really should have been looking at about 60 to 120.
Yeah, yeah, that is a problem. I think, do you know anything about CASA?
Yes,
Can you tell me a little bit about like how they're reviewed? Is there a review process for CASA?
they have a training program
Uh-huh.
for their volunteers, but there's no formal state review. The problem we've had with CASA is most of them tell the judge what they know he wants to hear. The real problem isn't with CASA so much as with the Child Protective Services, the CPS. And what CPS does is they go judge shopping till they find a judge who always agrees with them. And all of their cases are then heard by this judge. It's Kennedy here in the 4th Judicial District.
So we could kind of look at like what the attorneys are saying and matching and looking at which judges are the favored ones by CPS and see how that matches up?
No, there's no real way to correlate that other than experience. And that's hard to get because they try to hide their... there's a great deal of cronyism in the courts. And if you're going... one of the things we strongly recommend when you hire an attorney, you hire an attorney from outside your judicial district. Because of the attorneys in the same judicial district, he's going to be coming up before this judge again in a week or something on a case that means more to him or is paying him better or something. So he's not going to irritate the judge by making a bunch of demands on him, pushing for all the evidence to be admitted, for example. So one of the lessons learned is get an attorney from outside.
And that's like related to your list of good attorneys. Where can I find that?
On the
who are good at representing people?
On the Domestic Violence Against Men website, the
Okay.
DV Men, in Chapter 1, there's a section called You Will Need an Attorney.
Mm-hmm. And so, I'm just kind of figuring out how the CASA advocates would know what the judge wanted, how they would vote, or how they would recommend for what the judge wanted. How would they have any way of knowing that?
CPS coaches them.
Oh, so there's like CPS coaching.
Yeah, and also now in this state, typically they have a guardian ad litem, what's called a GAL, G-A-L.
Mm-hmm.
And that attorney also coaches them. The children have a GAL appointed, and then CASA looks after the children. But it's a failed system. The whole thing is.
So we're looking for someone from Equal Justice to help us make it work. Let me ask you another question here. I took my glasses off, so that's kind of the problem.
My arms aren't long enough.
Do you know Felix Cook?
No, I don't.
I just wondered if you knew he sits on the CASA board of directors, and he's also on performance evaluation, judicial performance evaluation.
For which district?
Jefferson County.
Okay, that would be 1st Judicial District.
Mm-hmm. So I just wondered how the same person could oversee if there's a relationship between what the CASAs submit and what the judges want, and how the same person sits on the board of both. He actually sits on the board of the Lakewood Municipal Judicial Review as well.
What you find is, I don't know about other states because I really only studied it in Colorado, but from what I've been told, what you have are these politicians who, they don't do anything, they just sit on boards and commissions, and they try to stay plugged in as to what the general popular feeling is among the commissioners. They don't listen to the people. God forbid that they actually pay any attention to the citizens. But they sit on numerous boards and commissions and golf with the judge, belong to the same clubs.
So you're saying that they don't listen to the citizens?
Well, do you think they do?
I don't know, but we were talking about citizens and judicial review, and are you aware that in 2010 the Citizen Review Board for the Colorado Performance Review Judicial Review was found to have those 4 citizens were the wives of judges and attorneys?
No, didn't know that. They're picked by, and in fact in the newsletter I outline who picks them: the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, I think the Supreme Court justices, the governor. But it's these cronies, and cronies are rampant throughout this. And to get anywhere in politics, you have to be on all of these boards, commissions, belong to the right clubs.
Okay, I want to ask you a question about if...
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. You absolutely did. I appreciate it, because I think you're seeing the same things that we're seeing. That cronyism and favoritism and having golf dates with the judges and knowing what the judge is looking for in the outcome of a case. These are really, very important flaws.
Well, first and foremost, the judges do not want their names in the paper.
Well, Judge Margie Enquist was doing adoptions on a Saturday at Jefferson County Court, and they went and took great pictures of adoptions being done on a Saturday by Judge Margie Enquist, which we're talking about adoptions in a system where in 1 year children can be taken out of a home and the parents treated like criminals and criminalized, and their evidence not heard and their witnesses not called in, and at the end of that year those children are adopted out, and here's the judge working on a Saturday to make sure that those kids are given permanent forever homes when their own parents, they don't have clear title to those children. Children are being...
Are you familiar with the speedy placement
Yes, that's what I'm talking
provisions
about.
of the federal law, and they get a bonus if they can
Yes.
get them out?
And they get adoption incentives for the caseworkers.
Yeah.
Do you realize that?
Oh yeah, no, I know, and it's as much as $25,000 bonus if they can get the children placed in a speedy fashion. What I refer to...
we have problems. We're asking doctors. We had a doctor sitting here and tell us about how the medical board of examiners took her license away because her custody case, the child was being given to the criminal and taken away from the protective mother. We're all about just equal justice.
Kids need both parents, but the way I refer to CPS is they're legalized kidnapping and they're running an adoption ring. And
what do you think what can we do? We're on the same
well,
page here.
Well, I went through a big hoorah in December and wrote it up. I wrote it up something about once a year on them, called "In the Face of Great Evil," about the way it's working here. There's a good story that I put out there. What happens when the Christ child's found in a manger out in East El Paso County, and so I've got that out there too, and a follow-up on how the child dies after being put in foster care, as we lose a lot. We lost 11 children here last year.
In El Paso?
In El Paso County, died, and at least half of them, or what I remember is about half of them, were in foster care or under protection of Child Protective Services.
That's
before.
a big number.
It's
11.
a sickening number.
That's a big number. How many children died at the hands of their parents in that same period?
About 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. And that's what, do you know Suzanne Shell? She lives here.
Yeah, I met Suzanne, yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what she's saying, is that children are 6 times more likely to die in foster care than...
Or at least 10 times more likely to be abused. And they'll put teenage girls in a foster home with boys. What's going to happen? Gee.
And like little kids.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, no, so, I fight it, and I fight it. The county commissioner, her name is Sally Clark, is in charge of Child Protective Services. And
she just won the election over
Karen Magistrelli. Yeah, no, I was supporting Karen. But, she's been in charge now for 8 years, and the situation has gotten worse and worse and worse. And the budget here for CPS is about $50 million a year. So 11 children died after she'd overseen the expenditure of about $500 million.
Does that include federal grant money?
That's mostly federal money. The county commissioners only support them to the tune of about 5%, certainly less than 10% of their budget is from the county.
I was thinking it was like 40% federal, 40% state, and 20% county.
I don't, what my recollection is it's 5 or 10% county. The county, to get to 20%, they might be counting the office space and everything because they got huge offices. So
yeah, they have brand new offices, don't they?
Yeah, they just moved. It was one of these great deals. Intel had a big chip manufacturing plant here that never went anywhere, so they abandoned it.
So what do you think of the theory, if you build it, they will come?
Well, let me go on with this, because Intel sold this thing on Garden of the Gods for $15 million in 2010, I believe it was, and the county bought it, part of it, the next year for $25 million. As I was saying, cronyism, associated, right clubs, the right realtors.
Well, we're building a brand new $217 million Justice Center, Frank Elkhart Justice Center, in front of our Colorado State House, between the State House and the Denver County Courthouse. We need more and more courts because litigation is out of control.
More and more laws. 400 new laws a year. You probably need one new attorney per law. And then, you hit the sheriff. The sheriff here is trying to get a separate tax because the county commissioners won't support him. So he wants a separate tax. Well, no, what he needs is fewer laws. Something like pass Amendment 64 and make marijuana legal, because everybody's got it now. My sons had access to marijuana when they were in junior high. Hell, I didn't know when even marijuana existed till I was in the Marines.
So you think that marijuana, it's too late to worry about taking away marijuana?
Well, I think there's no sense making it illegal. You might as well raise it legally. Hemp's a very valuable crop in and of itself.
Oh, I think it's one of the main reasons that Colorado is still not too badly in the recession. I think.
Well, the medical marijuana is big business, and also it's the most effective drug I've seen for veterans or any citizen with PTSD.
So, Mr. Windsor has talked about, making code of conduct law and make it a crime if it's violated. Talked about citizen review boards. When we're looking at like docket management is like a really critical factor in how well. I've been in courtrooms. They're so pleasant. Those judges can be so very pleasant, so very polite. They can, for the hour of the case, make everybody think that their parties are getting, just treatment. But what's the outcome? I think we need outcome. You remember outcome-based education? Outcome-based judicial results.
I mentioned that I was part of the review on the Falmouth High School in Cape Cod.
I'm from Massachusetts.
Yeah, I worked at Woods Hole a couple of times.
I'm talking about my...
So, and it's a funny high school. It's 1/3 of the students are going to go on to MIT and Yale because it's all the kids of the scientists. 1/3 are Wampanoag Indians, Native Americans. 1/3 are blacks, Cape Verdeans, in this one high school. And Massachusetts is kind of funny because in the 8th grade they have to decide if they're going to go on to general academic high school or they're going to go vocational rehab. Well, of course, I was with the general science. Geez, If you look at my personal homepage, I've got a thing there on education under essays that I wrote up after that. And, they're so far off the track that how do you get them back on?
The kids?
The schools.
The courts?
The kids. The schools, the courts, the whole damn thing, You collapse the system and start over, basically.
So are you talking revolution?
Well, one way or another, this system's going to collapse. I see it as a financial collapse. I think Ben Bernanke has every characteristic common to the Weimar Republic financial director, and he's playing the same games.
Nazi Germany?
No, the Weimar Republic that led to Nazi Germany. Back in the 20s, after the First World War, they formed this republic and then hit hyperinflation where, for $500 million mark wouldn't buy you a peanut.
What if we took the federal
You haven't seen the
grant
pictures of them burning money because it was...
the federal grant money?
The federal grant money's part of the problem. 30 cents on every dollar is borrowed. So, when you talk about grant money, you're talking about making the problem worse usually rather than solving it. Have you ever been involved in a federal grant? It's usually got, having been in research all my life, usually there's very strong strictures on it. You have to write up a report every 6 months or a year on what you've accomplished. Homelessness, what do they put into that?
And where's the review for that? That's what I want to know.
They got all kinds of papers about how much they've done and everything. What happens to homelessness? It gets worse every year. So the federal grants that I've seen have been part of the problem, not part of the solution. I mean, we operate on a budget of $5,000 or $6,000 a year.
You're big time.
Well, it's all volunteer. Well, I am big time. The past 14 consecutive years, they've listed me in Who's Who in the World, Who's Who in America, Who's Who in Science and Engineering.
How about Harvard?
What?
Harvard University.
I dated a professor from Harvard. That's another story.
I think I saw Equal Justice.
Well, Woods Hole and MIT are academically affiliated, so... But there's a story, I'm dating this professor from Harvard Medical, and my son at the time was 13, my youngest son. So we toured, it was getting pretty serious, and so we're staying up there with her, and she's coming down to the Cape. And we toured her labs. She was doing vision studies, or is doing vision studies, and using monkeys. So we toured the labs, and these are fancy labs at Harvard Medical. So my 13-year-old son does all this, looks at all this good stuff, thinks about it for a couple of weeks and said, "Dad, what do you see in her? All she knows how to do is kill monkeys." And I thought about it. Yeah.
So it sounds like, have you been through a divorce?
Oh, yeah. No, this is my fourth marriage. Yeah, no. I'm
Still go back.
not a real good... my current wife is just incredible. Well, being a research scientist, I'm and a former Marine. I always joke I took my sensitivity training in Marine Corps infantry. So, I'm probably not the easiest individual in the world to get along with.
But good-hearted.
What?
Good-hearted.
Hell no. Ornery, cantankerous, crotchety. But I'm not going to let the bastards get away with this crap if I can help it. I don't know if that's good-hearted or bad-hearted, but they made me mad. Mm-hmm. No, my third wife went violently insane back in the mid-90s, and that's what got me into this. And I'm legally blind in my right eye because of it. But I was the one that got arrested, went through a jury trial, was acquitted. 6 hours later, the Jefferson County deputies are back on my doorstep with another restraining order. Got that dismissed. She's what do you call him, a stock trader with Merrill Lynch. And so she was working up in Boulder, so she got another restraining order in Boulder. and got that dismissed, which is critical because I have to have security clearance and all the rest of it. If you've got a DV conviction, all that stuff goes away.
Right.
So that got me mad, and being a research scientist, you poke me, and I started doing research. And when I was at Woods Hole in the early 90s, 91, 92, I helped develop and design one of the first 100 websites. So it was pretty easy for me to develop websites and put all this stuff together and write it up, because I've been writing all my life. So when do you want me to stop? You can stop me at any time.
Well, we've gone an hour and 15 minutes, so we probably, or a little more, we probably should stop. Any last words from you? I was going to ask how you're financed, and then you told me you've got volunteers and a small amount. So you're retired and work hard. And
yeah, our members' dues are $25 a year, and then we're part of the combined federal campaign. So we get about $1,200–1,300 from federal employees, mostly troops here, because it's the troops here that get hit the worst. So.
Well, I think it's interesting that you're a victim of the family court system.
Ah, Jesus. Well, that's what made me mad. And, but, you got to see both sides of it too. And the judges, like on restraining orders, I literally have seen those handed out at the rate of one a minute. And actually they increase the danger. I have an example of 14 women and one male get the restraining order, 2 weeks later they're dead. They provide no protection whatsoever. But the judges give them because they do not want to see their name in the headlines. And if they won't give the woman the restraining order, and the woman ends up dead, then he's going to be in the headlines. The other side of it, if the man gets killed, so what? I just was doing this afternoon, a man stabbed to death up here in Aurora, and early in October. It got about that much column space, 3 paragraphs. A man gets stabbed by a woman, killed, so what? So there's a hell of a gender bias in the press. Women are much more willing to talk about the problems, though. You just see men don't tell.
Well, part of the movie is the fact that the mainstream media doesn't cover much of this stuff at all.
Oh, I've noticed on TV, though, my wife likes to watch these crime shows. Mm-hmm. And the villains lately have been more and more women. What's she like? The Mentalist. But more than half the time, the villain on The Mentalist is a woman, which comes out, of course. But so, and there are a few things that cover it. There's a video, Men Don't Tell, but you play hell finding it. I finally put a link out there on it.
Where does it come from?
Men Don't Tell, I think it's a 1960s movie about a violent wife. And
we've got open minds.
Well, hey, the system isn't working for men or women. And in fact, making the laws gender bias made it worse in many cases, I think, for women. Because, you take these veterans, these are killers. Every time they had me on the stand, I was a trained killer. I felt like saying, what the fuck do you think Marine Corps infantry does? But, you piss them off enough, and they're going to come back, and they're going to kill. So you get a whole lot of stories of he killed the wife, and he killed the kids, and then committed suicide. And if you start looking back, it was after she got a restraining order and moved in with her boyfriend, and sent him a nasty, took everything he had. You made him mad. Hey, he's been killing people for a living. Ain't a good idea to make him madder.
we certainly need to figure out ways to protect people who are not the perpetrators.
Well,
I talked to a man. I wanted to tell you this story because a sweet guy, little, small man. His wife was a sergeant in the police department in New Hampshire, and she beat the crap out of him and took the kids. And he went to the domestic violence shelter or whatever it's called, and they refused to help him because he was a man.
oh yeah, no, you get that all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you can
He
see.
wanted a group. He wanted somebody he could sit and talk with. They wouldn't let him participate.
You can see how messed up.
Well, a lot of men, if you can get them to talk, a lot of people, men and women, just want to talk and have their story told. So that's one of the things we do. So if you look at our websites, we've got hundreds of stories out there by men and women. A whole section in women's own words where women have sent in their stories and we just post them for them. We'll do it anonymously unless they want, because retaliation is the name of the game in these court cases. You've probably heard that. You bring the judge, you name the judge, and if he can tie it back to you, he's going to retaliate almost always. They're bad judges.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that the Marines, the service people, the Air Force community here in this county would have to be a whole different demographic than the Denver County, for instance? You've got gentlemen who have risked their lives, they've got post-traumatic stress disorders and the other issues that you talked about. And then you've got Denver's, business-driven, downtown, bar scene professionals who aren't going to be doing as much of the physical illness or, even bar hopping, or isn't that going to be a completely different demographic?
Well, it is quite, yes. I get stared at quite often with my Marine Corps license plates when I go to Denver.
Right.
But the difference between military and civilians is discipline. Military are generally a very disciplined lot. However, if you turn that discipline where they want to get at you, they're very good at plotting a campaign. I mean, that's what they're trained to do.
Right.
So they'll carry out a disciplined attack much more effectively than a civilian would in most cases.
And my thought would be on that is that the target would be each other. I don't care if it's man or a woman. Okay, so hear me out. If you're looking at the Denver population, they're using their attorneys, they're using their children as the weapon. Not their fists. Just a thought.
One of the attorneys I work with closely is a Boulder attorney, and his fee, I think, is at least $500 an hour. And I asked him, well, hasn't business dropped off with the recession and everything? Nope, they're still fighting. He's got clients who have been fighting for 10 years. Why the hell do they keep doing it? They just want to fight. And they, want to do it in the courts. They think that eventually if they go to court enough, they'll win. But the military will generally say, I'm not going to win that battle. You don't take on fight not going to win. It's part of the discipline. But, and if the other thing with military is they will become physical, whereas most civilians abhor physical violence. To me, it's, force and violence are normal.
Or use the court though instead.
The war is the courts and the kids.
The guys know that if they go to court, they're likely to lose, particularly if they got PTSD, TBI, some other disabilities. The courts are not going to give it to them.
If we could convince you that that is no longer true based on federal funding patterns? What would you think?
I think you got a lot of convincing to do, because what I've seen with federal funding patterns is they make these problems worse.
We're seeing fatherhood grant money from Clinton's 1998 Safe Families Act.
I'm seeing the same money coming down because I sit in on the DV task force here, and also been sitting in on the DV Offender Management Board meetings, and was on there, helped revise the standards for treatment for domestic violence. That took us 5 years, and try to make it gender neutral. You still recording?
Yeah, we could cut those.
Well, I can clip it.
Put that on?
I think I can get it here. Is it picking up?
Yeah.
Okay. The people, to get this grant money, you have to have professional grant writers. So groups like Tessa here, who survive on a mere $1.5 million a year of federal and state money, have professional grant writers. I could spend all my time writing grants, proposals, and maybe get some of the money, but then I'd have to adhere to the strictures of the grant proposal. So there's a fatherhood as part of one of the DV treatment groups here, and they're supposedly helping fathers be better fathers and forego their violence. Well, the problem a lot of times, half the time, isn't that the man is violent, it's that the woman's violent, but they're trying to train the father to be a better father when usually the problem is the mother. Or I say usually, I would say very commonly. So I am not seeing these things being effective because they're applied with the gender bias in mind, and also under the strictures that if you don't adhere to the political line, you're not politically correct, you're not going to get the grant money. And so it's this politically correctness that's really killing a lot of this. Mm-hmm. So I see a lot of, the very great majority of the grant money I see is just being wasted. Paying for these people's salaries. 80–90% of these groups, very commonly, it's salaries that's taking up the money. And they'll be drawing down $100,000, $300,000 a year as salaries for leading these programs. Mm-hmm. And that's not at all uncommon. And, you know, I'm not going to say that's an effective...
So the key is in finding out where the county money's going.
Well, I know where the county money's going, you know, just show me the nearest rat hole. And, you know, these people are sucking it up big time. And the programs are so simplistic, from what I've been able to determine, that they're of very little help except to a moron. Well, you know, the stories I get back. Oh, they showed me this film of this black guy beating his wife, who happened to be white. Well, what's that teach you? Racism. You know, they talked about all men are batterers. Have you seen this cycle of violence, this wheel that they have? You know how often I've seen that in 10, 12 years? No.
No?
Almost never. What you usually see is some mental health problem. With women, it's borderline personality, very commonly, or bipolar. And a lot of times it's hard to tell the difference. It's estimated that 2% of the population suffer from borderline personality disorder, and 75% of the diagnosed cases of that are female. So if you see some real cycle like that, one of the first things is okay, is she doing this, is she doing that, because there are fairly well-defined criteria for borderline personality. Then, of course, things like war injuries, post-traumatic. And women get post-traumatic too, because you get in a car accident or traumatic brain injuries. You know, any kind of accident can result in these things. So you see all those associated problems. There are a whole raft of mental illnesses that get involved. Schizophrenia is something that we've seen fairly often.
Right.
Not this controlled cycle of violence where he's trying to control his wife, power and control issues. That I rarely see. I see just a lot of crazy people. And you talk to women and all men are crazy, and you talk to the other sex and, you know, the other sex is all crazy. I think it's about equal. You know, we're all crazy probably in some way. But in relationships, and you know, you're not going to sort out human relationships in a courtroom.
No, that's why we need outcome-based results. We need to look at the results.
Yeah, and
Are people dying?
lots of luck.
Are children being passed back and forth? Are they being put
Oh,
in situations
God.
that are dangerous? That's where we're going. We're just...
What I push is what I call a duplex marriage. You know,
I know what you're saying.
you know, they can't stay married, but you know, they should live close enough together that the kids can go back and forth without any interference. Kids stay in the same school. What got me going on that was a woman got arrested up here in Breckenridge for domestic violence. She slapped her husband. She was a former cop, and she was out in Texas somewhere, Dallas, I think. And the kid was visiting with Dad for the holidays. And she'd come up to let the kid, and she was going to go back home, and she got in an argument with the ex as she's getting ready to fly back home, and slapped him. The cops come, and they arrest her. So we had a long talk. She runs a private investigation agency, you know. I talk, you know, and hey, look, you know. Ended up, he lives in one level of this condo, and she lives, I guess, above him, kind of thing. And they seem, you know, I haven't heard any problems for years now. But those kind of arrangements, hey, you can't live together, you know.
But you need to work it out.
You know, stay in the same house, or, you know, a couple houses away, wherever you can.
Interesting.
But we get case after case where the woman, oh yeah, he, you know, violent, you know, call the 911, I'm going to get everything. Attorneys will tell them. Perjury, suborning perjury is not a crime in this state. So
Supporting perjury is not a crime.
Suborning perjury is not a crime. It doesn't matter if it's a federal crime, it doesn't apply. It's a state case.
If it's a state case, yeah.
And so what we get are attorneys telling women, look, you know, get a restraining order. That gets him out of the house, gives you custody of the kids. You've got the bank accounts. And they call it the silver bullet in a divorce.
It works both ways, though.
Rarely can men do it. I mean, I've seen it done, but
It's
usually,
happening
well, men are getting wise. But usually it only occurs if the husband is in the legal system, an attorney, or works in the courts somehow, you know, and got buddies,
Yeah.
or plays golf
Back
with
to
the
that
judge.
Good old buddy system there.
So, you know, the husband has got to have it, but the woman doesn't have to have any connections, because the judge is afraid that, you know, his name will be in the headlines after he kills her, because he wouldn't give her the restraining order,
Right.
which actually increases the danger. So we see this, and then 2 years later, we get the same women back. Because I tell men time after time, turn the house back to the bank. You know, you're not going to win. Just, you know, go down, talk to the bank, tell them, you know, what's going on. It won't be the first case the bank's heard. The restraining order or domestic violence, if he's convicted, or under the restraining order, or they usually arrange to violate the restraining order if he doesn't obey, or if he calls up and tries to talk to the kids or see the kids. And they'll get in a big argument about it, so he violates the restraining order. He's back to jail, convicted, because violation of restraining order is criminal, even though it's a civil order. Well, this goes on for about 6 months, and he's out of a job almost 80% of the time. The house gets sold or foreclosed on. There's no child support because he doesn't have any job, and because he doesn't pay child support, he goes back to jail. Something like 20% of the people in our county jail are there because of these kind of cases. And so she's got no child support. She probably has no skills to earn anything but minimum wage at best. And then child care takes up half of what she earns. And 2 years later, it's just a disaster. CPS gets in the act because anytime there's domestic violence involved, CPS is notified. So when things start to go to hell, CPS starts looking at it. So there's a good chance she loses the kids.
Just let it go.
Or she's living with a real abuser now, but can't get rid of him because he's the only one that's paying the bills or the house, or roof over his head, and she knows if she learned the first time what happens. So
well, I will tell you, there is grant money available to help fathers in those situations, but you know what I think they're doing with it? I think they're going after the fathers who have money to keep the wife coming back into the court, and there's something going on with that fatherhood grant money, and I need you to help me figure it out.
well, I wish we could.
There's money there. It's targeted for fatherhood initiative. It's be there for your kids. It's kids first. Last time I checked, there were 13 different fatherhood initiative, fatherhood grants with different names that we're getting. I know in Jefferson County it was $26 million
Doesn't surprise me a bit.
1 year.
And how many kids has it helped? Do you know about?
It's not.
Well, it
Maybe
depends.
that'd be my
It
take. Yeah.
depends. You know, it's hard to get that information, and that's why we need the outcomes. We need to see where the kids are and how they're doing. And that's how we determine what's going to happen next. Where are the kids and how are they doing? That's what we care about.
They're not doing well.
If
And
we
I
know
don't
there's
think-
this many people, many children dying, it's not working.
Well, you know,
He said it's broken.
I publish it. Our newsletter goes out to about 200,000 people all over the world. It gets reposted widely. You know, the problem, first and foremost, the problem doesn't exist until you document it. Like you say, you need to track where the kids are, outcome.
You know,
But the problem doesn't exist because there's no documentation.
I want to go to some of these kids and say, you know, how's it working for you? How much federal money is exchanging hands for you to be here?
CPS
State
is
money?
all private.
I know. So there you go.
You know, we can't
It's
release any.
confidentiality laws. Well, we cannot
Yeah.
allow that to happen if they're not doing their job. So we need support from all quarters. We need everybody to look at what are the things we can agree on.
Well, the whole system is designed to break you. If you're going to defend yourself in court, the first thing you find is she's probably got your money tied up. When I went through this crap, we had to sell a house.
Right.
I put the money in the court. There's some sort of court fund for safekeeping till the case was settled, the divorce was settled.
Like an escrow account.
Yeah, court escrow account.
Registry of the court.
Yeah. Her attorney filed a motion to award her the money, didn't bother to send my attorney or me a copy of the motion, and the judge granted the motion and she took the money, which we found out after the fact. And of course, And
It's
that,
dirty business. It's dirty. It's no way to treat a lady. It's no way to treat a man.
hey, it's no way to be
people.
human.
That's right. So we got to figure this out. And we
Oh,
really
well, the whole
appreciate you
system
coming.
is broken, but, you know, these people, well, you were talking about passing more laws. Now, you don't fix bad laws with more
I
laws.
don't see them getting rid of any laws, though. I don't see
Now,
them.
that's, you know, it's harder to get rid of a law than it is to pass a new one.
Well, if you got rules they're supposed to live by, then theoretically the law already exists. Trouble is they don't go by them, there's no consequences. So that's why I say just make those things laws. They'll immediately start to adhere to.
Who's going to enforce them?
You know, we're going to have to replace everybody in Congress, all the judges, all the sheriffs, all the district attorneys.
Well, you know, you don't want to replace all. You want to
Replace the one. You keep the ones that are good, and will do the right
yeah,
thing.
and at first,
Find a way to
Make them
discern.
accountable.
Discernment.
well, that's, you know,
Discernment
what I'm trying to
is really
do
important.
is, you know, how do we evaluate them? And how do we keep the good ones? Because, let's see, they set up that performance review thing in 1988 because of these problems with the judges. And they've been working away since, but,
Things are not getting better.
you know, 5 judges out of 1,200 get recommended, and you know that, you know, at least 5% of them are incompetent. So, and how do you pick the good ones? Because this Matt Arnold, who runs the Clear the Bench, well, you know, based on their appeals. Well, a good judge who goes against somebody who's got money, they're going to appeal. Or what we see is radical feminists. If they lose a case, they appeal. I was talking to the district attorney here, Dan May, because they called him on the stand. They've got a cop here, Sydney Huffman's her name, who kept filing false charges against a Manitou Springs cop that she was going with when he tried to break up. So after a couple of years, I think after about 3 trials and he was found innocent all the time, they filed felony charges against her. Of course, they put her on leave, and a paid leave for a year from the Colorado Springs Police Department.
2 cops.
And then they got really upset because of the felony charge, so they subpoenaed the district attorney to appear on this. So I'm talking to Dan. I said, geez, what's going on about this? And he says, God, that wasn't as bad. He says, one time we arrested a woman because she kept refusing to appear and ignored the subpoenas. He said, Tessa just swamped. They filled the courtroom. It's court watching is very effective. So if you're looking for a technique, court watching works, and the feminists have been using that for a long time. I first saw that used against me when I'm in this Boulder case.
We could talk all night, couldn't we?
And on and on. Well, if you're in Jefferson County, where are you out of?
Marietta, Georgia.
Hell, I don't get to Marietta, Georgia too often. Well,
It's as corrupt there as you're ever going to find.
yeah, no, I hear from it too. Fulton County is where I usually hear.
Yeah. I managed to present charges against 6 federal judges to the Fulton County District Attorney, up to the Fulton County Grand Jury. I also presented charges against the Fulton County District Attorney. I was allowed, after years of trying to get in front of the grand jury. I presented my charges. They had already been told that I was a lunatic and not to believe me. But fortunately, everything they brought up, I brought in a little notebook for each of them. I was able to direct them to the page that proved that whatever they had been told was false. So they said, we want you to come back. This was on a Friday. We want you to come back on Tuesday, continue your testimony, bring us a 20-page document listing your charges, and footnote your evidence and put it in a box, all numbered for us, and just give us a presentation the same way the district attorney does. I said, well, I've never seen what the district attorney does. I've never been part of a grand jury. They said, well, just a slam bam, thank you, ma'am presentation. I said, I understand exactly what that is. So I worked all weekend, confirmed that I was to be there on the Tuesday and at 9 o'clock and all this. I come up on the elevator in the Fulton County Courthouse with my little dolly back there, 2 boxes on it, wheel it off. I met my 3 Fulton County Sheriff's deputies and the chief investigator for the district attorney. They forcibly removed me from the courthouse and gave me a criminal trespass warning that said if I ever returned to the 3rd, 6th, or 7th floors, I'll be arrested on sight. And then, of course, nobody would come to the rescue because the federal judges had put the word in, I had to be stopped at all costs. That's a minimum of 10 years in under Georgia law for tampering with somebody in the middle of their grand jury testimony, and not a soul in America will do anything about it. So
No.
I'm doing something about it myself.
Well, this, getting the word out, like I said, the problem doesn't exist if it's not documented. So until you document it, it doesn't exist.